Food Trucker School is now in session, episode 16. Let's do it. What's up, Food Truckers? Pat Flynn here, your host, and FoodTruckr.com is here to help you take your food truck business to the next level. Whether you're just starting out or you've been in this biz for a while, this is the show for you. On today's episode, we have Patrice Perkins. She calls herself a blogger. That's B-L-A-W-G-E-R. And the reason for that is because she's a Chicago-based attorney who blogs at creativegeniussociety.com and also creativegeniuslaw.com. She works extremely closely with food truck owners and operators in the Chicago area, and she's going to help us out today tackling a lot of important questions that I think we all need to pay attention to, whether we're just starting out or we've been doing this for a while, because, a lot of things can happen in our business and we need to be prepared. So without further ado, here's Patrice. Patrice, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Pat. I'm excited to be here.
And the reason we call you a blogger is because you are a Chicago-based attorney who has a blog, and you've been helping food truck owners for quite a while now. You started the Street Food Artistry Fest in 2011, which I think is so awesome. Tell us a little bit about how you started to get involved with food trucks.
So I have been a self-proclaimed foodie for quite some time now. So it purely started out of my love for food. Combined with my love for food, I also have an interest in micro business enterprises, and I started really following the food truck trend out in LA through Roaming Hunger, which was a website started by Ross Resnick, and it tracked all of the food trucks in Los Angeles. And so I was just really intrigued by how the trend had taken off there. And then I really started kind of hunting down and following what was happening on the local scene here. And so when I started that Food Truck Fest, it was really as a way to spotlight the food trucks early on here in Chicago, but it also evolved into providing pro bono services for a couple of the participants of that festival.
That's awesome. And we'll get into some of that, the legal stuff, which is what the show is about, because that's something that a lot of food truck owners, when they get into this, they know they have to deal with, but they kind of don't want to. There's a lot to go along with it. And of course, it's different in every city. But tell us a little bit about the food truck scene in Chicago. What's it like? What was it like when you first started, and how has it sort of evolved?
It's come a long way, but of course, there's still a ways to go. So back when we started planning for Street Food Artistry the first year, that was 2010 when we started planning. And so the laws were very food truck friendly. There was an ordinance on the table that would make things a little bit more food truck friendly for Chicago. And so the big thing was that our trucks here were not permitted to cook on their trucks, which obviously would affect the quality of the food. It just added an additional burden to the guys here who are operating the food trucks. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the biggest changes that came along in the ordinance, an amendment to the ordinance that was introduced in 2012 as a result of a push from the food truck community with the support of local aldermen. So the food truck owners can now actually cook on the truck. They no longer have to prepare it in a commercial kitchen and then just dispense it. And so that was huge. Yeah. Also, Chicago has a law where, an ordinance where no food truck can sell within 200 feet of a restaurant. And so obviously that's a tremendous burden. That is still in effect. But the thing that did change as a result of the ordinance amendment was that the hours of operation went from being prohibited between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. to now being prohibited between 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. So you still have that 200 feet restriction, but there's some more flexibility so that they can get some of that nightlife clientele. Yeah,
that's a great point. And wow, it's just incredible how things are changing everywhere nowadays. What can food truck owners do either together or by themselves to support positive legal changes in their own cities?
I think that it boils down to a few things. Number one, staying knowledgeable about what your local laws are. And that's something you can look up the ordinance online for your for your city or for your county, but just being knowledgeable and taking that proactive step. I know everyone is busy with actually running the business, but being empowered as a business owner with knowing the law takes things to a whole nother level. So that's the first piece of it. Mm-hmm. The second piece of it is not operating in silo and really connecting with the community of food truck owners that are out there. There's a lot of experience out there and a lot of things that are really just learned on the fly and learned by doing. And so really connecting with those food truck owners who have the experience and who know kind of what the challenges are that are presented by the legal landscape, and what really the potential is for that. And then also just knowing your local representatives and making your voice known, attending alderman meetings. They all have public meetings that the community can attend, and just getting to know who your representatives are. So that's really where it starts.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point, that last one you made there, knowing who your representative is. We've even talked about this in the past when it comes to health code, like understanding who the person is that's going to be checking your truck and going through all your paperwork. It's really important just to get to know and build relationships with those people. And I think that in turn will help you become more knowledgeable about everything that is going on around you and in your city. Now, would you feel like, as a new food truck owner, I can imagine somebody being very shy or kind of being reluctant to reach out to other food trucks to say something like, "Hey guys, I'm the new truck in the area. I'm looking for some help." Would you say that existing food truck owners are more on the friendly side and happy and are welcoming to new food trucks and trying to help everybody out, or are they more sort of like, "Hey, this is our territory" type of thing?
I think that it can be very territorial depending on, and this will sound interesting, but depending on the legal landscape. Here in Chicago, you have designated food truck zones. And so obviously there's some level of competition that comes with that. And so where, in other cities where the laws are a lot more amenable to the food truck community, you may not have, there may not need to be so much of that spirit of competition. So I really think that legal landscape trickles down and affects how much of a community the food truck community will really be. But I do think that it's the responsibility of the new food truck owner. You just got to get over it. Just like, in any other business, we're going to have challenges, but we've got to get over the emotion and the nervousness and just, keep plugging away and trying to develop those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're a newcomer to anything, really what you want to try and do is be as helpful as possible, provide as much value, and not come in like, "Hey, I'm the new guy, I'm going to take over," but, "Hey, I'm the new guy, I'm here to help you if you need it. Maybe you could help me out too."
Exactly. And I think that it's important for all food truck owners, new and old, to remember that there is power in numbers. And so when we talk about affecting change on the local level, that takes some level of, having a united front and working together. And so I think that if, everyone keeps in mind that larger goal, then the importance of kind of working together and truly being a community becomes even more evident.
Absolutely. Now, Patrice, going back to your blog, Creative Genius Society. So everybody, you should definitely check out creativegeniussociety.com. Not just for food truck owners, but for anybody out there. Oftentimes in our lives or in our business, we have legal things to deal with. How would you recommend anybody get affordable legal advice? Because as we know, lawyers can be very expensive. Is there any way to get advice that is actually legit in an affordable way?
Yes, and I'm so glad that you said legit, Pat, because that's key. And the internet is a gift and a curse because there's a lot of great information out there, and there's a lot of not so great. And so, the entrepreneur really ends up kind of having to sift through what's legit and what's not. And so what I would recommend is, number one, check with your local SCORE office. A SCORE is a great resource for workshops, for, some limited counsel. So I would start there. And then I will also check out the local law school clinics. Most law schools at this point have an entrepreneurship clinic, and they usually are only able to take on a limited amount of clients each semester. However, depending on when you get your application in or what their process is, you may be able to get some of your core legal needs taken care of by the law students under the supervision of their attorney professor at, free, or if there is a cost, it would be a very minimal cost. So I think that you can't overlook your local law school community.
That's great advice. I never heard that before. Thank you for that. And in terms of SCORE, the URL or the web address for that is score.org. So score.org. And you'll be able to find a chapter there in your local area that could help you out. And, they even say on the website, get free business advice near you. So that's a great, great resource. Now, going back to food truck owners specifically, what are some common laws that, you definitely have to make sure you have in place before you can move forward? And maybe some beyond that, what are some, or along the same lines, what are some big mistakes that food truck owners seem to be making now and again?
Yes, and so I'm going to give you the common laws, but I also want to touch on some of the not so common, because those are where I kind of tend to see missed opportunities.
Perfect.
So the common, of course, on the state level, you just need to be familiar with generally the laws of forming a business entity in your state. No food truck owner should be out there operating as a sole proprietor, because if anything goes wrong in the business, then you've opened up your personal assets to liability. So you definitely want to form a business entity, whether it's an LLC or a corporation. And so you need to be familiar with your state statute in terms of business entity formation. So that's the first one. Then on the city or county level, you're going to have your local ordinance and rules that will govern operating a food truck business. And so your first stop is going to be usually a business affairs website for your city or for your county. And so you're going to need to familiarize yourself with your local ordinance, which will address anything that you need to know as it pertains to licensing. One important thing that I want to point out is that most states will distinguish between a mobile food dispenser versus a mobile food preparer. So the preparer is the food truck owner who's actually preparing food on the truck, which is probably 90% of the folks out there. The mobile food dispenser, you're preparing the food in the commercial kitchen, but you are just distributing or selling it on the truck. And so there's usually going to be a separate ordinance depending on which category you fall into. And of course, if you're a dispenser, your kind of the requirements that you have to meet are going to be a lot stricter. So you want to, make sure you're clear on which category you fall into. Some of the common local requirements are going to be maintaining a sanitation certificate. You want to make sure that you're clear on what the zoning aspect of the ordinance permits. So can you only park at a given area for 2 hours and sell? That's the law here in Chicago. And so you need to be clear on, what that time limit is. Is there a zoning restriction in terms of how near or far you can be from a local restaurant? Hours of operation restrictions. A lot of the cities will have a requirement for a minimum amounts of insurance coverage that you have to have. So you just need to really become intimately involved with your local ordinance. And then the two laws that I want to touch on that some people talk about. One of them nobody ever talks about. The other one some people talk about, but are just as important as those operational laws, trademarks. The food truck industry is incredibly competitive right now, and it's also a trend. And so one of the big things that I always think about is what's next. And so when you think about what's next, you need to start thinking about how your brand can outlast this food truck trend. If it goes down tomorrow, if it goes up in flames, how can you survive? And the way that you do that is by building a very strong brand and protecting it with a trademark. And so most food truck owners that I know do not have their trademark registered. However, if you are doing anything on a national level, TV appearances, if you're anticipating perhaps a cookbook, you need to really have preferably an attorney, research your trademark, make sure it's viable, make sure you're not infringing on anyone else's, and register that trademark. That's absolutely key. And then the last thing I want to touch on, which is one of my favorite forms of intellectual property, but never discussed, is the trade secret.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, a trade secret is anything that you have in your business that is a secret and gives your business a competitive edge and has economic value. So what that means for the food truck owners is your recipes. That kind of may be your secret sauce.
Right.
That's your trade secret. And the only way that you protect the trade secret is, number one, by treating it as secret. So by labeling it confidential, by having anyone who has access to it sign a non-disclosure or a confidentiality agreement. And then you've protected your trade secret. And one thing that's very powerful to know, for example, a trade secret lasts a lifetime. A patent only lasts 20 years. But if we think about Coca-Cola and how their formula is top secret,
right,
that formula is actually protected by trade secret, not patent.
Oh.
So right? That's really powerful. So when you start to think about what's next and how you can set yourself apart and how the law can protect you, start now to kind of identify what your trade secrets are. It's governed by state statute, so you can look up your statute on the definition of a trade secret, make a list, mark it as confidential, and start to have everyone that works with you sign a non-disclosure and only make your trade secrets accessible on a need-to-know basis.
Perfect. Patrice, that's amazing advice. Thank you. And I think a lot of what this is about is just, preparing for the future and putting things in place now so that you'll be okay later. That's really what this is all about. And those are two things, the trademarking. I think any business who's it's completely, it's all incredibly powerful stuff that we really need to consider. And the last thing I'm going to ask you, Patrice, and again, thank you for all this great information, is let's say, we're a food truck and we're out there doing business, and then all of a sudden, something happens where legal action is then brought upon us. I can see a lot of people freaking out at that point. What are the first few steps if, and hopefully none of this happens, but if something were to happen, what are our first steps in order to take care of this and not be so stressed about it?
Well, I think that it starts with being proactive in your business. And so what you want to do before that big thing happens, even though you may initially work with SCORE or work with your law school clinic, start developing relationships with attorneys now. Start developing relationships with attorneys, vet them, find one that you're comfortable with, so that when something does happen, you've at least already got a relationship developed and a go-to attorney. You already know perhaps what, retainer they may ask of you, so that you can start to kind of build that into your longer-term budget. And so you don't, now you can just focus on going to that attorney, resolving the problem versus having to worry about getting referrals, vetting them, and all of that. So that's the first piece of advice. The second is that you never want to ignore anything. I know that, we're busy on the streets and managing the day-to-day operations of the business, but you never want to ignore anything. Most legal problems can be resolved with communication. People start to get angry when they are ignored. And so you just want to pass whatever that communication is on to an attorney and let them deal with it as soon as possible. So that's the second piece of advice.
Perfect. Patrice, thank you so much again for your time today in this amazing interview. If you'd like to direct everybody out there listening to where they can find out more information about what you do and where you're at, where would you want them to go?
Absolutely. So you can check out my blog, Creative Genius Society, at creativegeniussociety.com, and also my website for legal services, which is Creative Genius Law, at creativegeniuslaw.com. And I'm also on all social media, Twitter and Facebook, at Genius Approved.
All right. We'll make sure to put all those links in there for everybody's convenience on the show notes, which I'll mention after we hang up. And again, thank you so much for your time, Patrice. This has been an amazing, great, very educational interview. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Patrice Perkins. Again, you can find her at creativegeniussociety.com and also creativegeniuslaw.com. Of course, if you want all the links and the show notes for this episode, head on over to foodtruckr.com/16. Again, that's foodtruckr.com/16. Thank you again for spending time with us today. Thank you, Patrice, for your time and your knowledge and wisdom. And for those of you listening, you're awesome. Keep trucking. Have an awesome day. And, if you have a second, please leave a review on iTunes. Those are extremely helpful for the show. And we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.